Well, it's been 40 years now, 40 years since the crowning glory moment for Indian cricket. The first. People always say you never forget your first. The first, not talking about those kind of, pun not intended, not talking about those kind of first, my friend, not those first, it's a family friendly show. But beyond that, first, Sarthak man, not cool. Anyway, 83, first World Cup win, underdog story for the ages. A lot has been said, but truth be told, that was really the moment, if you'd say, for Indian cricket.
It was
The
undoubtedly
moment.
the moment that gave Indian cricket identity.
Yeah.
It was the moment that changed the face of the game in our land. It was always a celebrated game, but then it moved to another level altogether. And like for every sport, you need that one moment that lifts the entire nation, that gives the sport a different look and feel altogether. For cricket, it was that moment, and it was only an upward trajectory from then. We were we weren't even there in the picture back then, but Nikhil perhaps was. He witnessed. He would remember it more than both of us combined would.
Obviously.
So over to Nikhil as we.
How I want to know how old were you guys when that happened?
We weren't born.
We weren't born.
I know. That's why.
Minus 10. 93 born.
I was minus 11.
Minus 10, minus 11. Yeah. At the risk of giving away my age, I was also very small to remember anything about it. Just 5 years of age, I did not have any idea of what had happened. I have no memory as such of when that thing happened. But, I have memory of my interest in cricket from 10 years onward. And in those memories of my first bit, all memories are associated with 83 because that hangover lasted for more than 5 to 10 years. So imagine, me as a 5-year-old has no memory of what happened at the 83 World Cup. Okay. But me as a 10-year-old who started playing cricket, just like any other kid in India, in your locality with your friends and, what have you. Even then I know a lot of things about 83, and it's not that I started knowing about those things when I started reading or when I became a journalist. No, I'm talking about my earliest cricket memories of even playing cricket had a lot to do with 83 World Cup because, as I said, the hangover lasted for a good 5-10 years. So everything that you did on the cricket field had some sort of a story that related to 83. But that's another matter that, and probably that's the reason why I picked this as, I've only written one book in my life. And probably that's why I only picked the 83 World Cup, because I just grew up listening to 83 World Cup stories. And I thought at that time that, there is so much to this story, and there are so many anecdotes and so many different angles to cover that this deserved a book on its own. So when I actually sat down to write my first and only book till now, it had to be of the 83 World Cup. So that's the kind of impact it had on my generation and the generation before that and the generation before that, and probably even one generation after me, I think. So it transcends generations to that extent, and that's why the impact, maybe we'll get into the nitty-gritties a little later, but I think, to just sum up what the 83 win means, I think, since then we've got various other triumphs to celebrate, whether it was the 2007 T20 World Cup or the 2011 50 over World Cup. But I think what really sets 83 apart is what Kirti Azad said very recently. He said, no matter what happens from here on in Indian cricket, we will always be the first ones to do it. So you're never going to forget an Armstrong, right? So he was the first one. So he reached the moon, the first man. So you'll always remember him. Thereafter, there were many others. Or, Tenzing Norway, reaching the Mount Everest. Yeah. So I guess, so in that context, I think that's a good analogy. So you'll never forget what happened in 83. And I think the various other subplots, which is why I'm sorry to disappoint the generation that witnessed 2007 and 11. nothing ever will compare to the 1983 World Cup triumph in Indian cricket.
No, but I do get your point, because as you were saying, you said that it lives through generations. Now, obviously, neither Harshit or I were around even at that point to witness it. But I don't know about you, and you can fill in. But I've heard stories, countless stories. Again, come from a family where a lot of sport was watched, not just cricket. But of course, when you're talking about cricket, if I remember the first World Cup I watched proper would have been 2003.
Same.
9-10 years old
Same.
around that time. But the only stories you got to hear from your parents, from relatives, was about 83, was about the 17 for 5, was about how you beat West Indies in a low scoring final.
Yeah.
You didn't have much runs to defend, but you hear those stories, they come down generations, and that's how I think anyone and everyone in this nation who becomes a cricket fan, really that is that starting point.
Same, for me as well, growing up, for me, I watched the biggest moments, let's say, that we've witnessed over the last 10-15 years in Indian cricket history has been with my father, let's say. I watched 2007 with him, I watched 2011 with him, I watched 2013 with him as well. So, there's a lot of, we have that cricketing bond, let's say. And he would often tell me about 80. He would tell me about, the bowlers that the West Indian side back in the day had. Not just the bowlers, the batters too, and how mountainous a task it would be. And not just beating them once, but twice in that tournament. It was a fairy tale in many ways. So those are the kind of stories, of 83. And, with every generation, especially that generation, the generation, let's say, that my father comes from, whenever they would talk about it, there'd be that smile on the face, which would tell you so much more about what it meant and how Herculean a task it would be. In today's day and age, let's say, if India are that side right now, let's say, 2-time champions going into a World Cup again, it's like expecting, let's say, a Bangladesh who's shown promise to go ahead and win the tournament.
Correct.
When you've got the bigger dogs as well in the tournament. So, you can only imagine what it would mean to Bangladesh if they were to go ahead and win the World Cup in India.
Correct.
So, maybe that's what it meant back in the day, and it definitely, does continue to be a moment that is celebrated, has been celebrated all along, and perhaps the crowning moment as well that India needed back in the day to take cricket to the next level.
I think it was, I mean, Bangladesh winning, a World Cup. I think the other example that I can think of was, Leicester City going on and winning the EPL in the recent past is something.
2015-16?
16,
That was the year.
yeah, 16, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can remember, and people want, and now that the movie is made, I know a lot of people know the story, but I think the movie also doesn't show you all aspects of what was really achieved. Though I think the movie really faltered on certain parameters. For example, I remember that scene in the film where it is, Yashpal Sharma, Chika, Kirtiala, all of them sitting and watching the West Indian bowlers in the nets. I don't know if you guys seen the 1983 film, but they're watching them in the nets. And they're like, oh, look at this is Malcolm Marshall, or this is, Michael Holding and Andy Roberts. I found that a bit strange because, it wasn't the first time that they were seeing these guys, right? So they had played series against them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They had even toured West Indies just a few months before that.
Yeah.
So I found it rather funny that, when you're going to the World Cup, so it was shown like they reached the World Cup and they're watching a net session of the West Indies and they're going like, oh, look at that. That is Marshall. Oh, look. It's like, first time you're seeing some NBA All-Stars and you're like, wow, in real life, look at them, how they look, and look at them, how they bowl, or how quickly. But that wasn't the case. They had just toured the West Indies. They played it was about a 2-month-long tour. So there were a lot of these things, but I guess that's what they call creative freedom in filmmaking, that you can take that much liberty and add masala to it to just give context to how it happened. Though in reality, it was not the case. And actually, that takes me to the point of certain aspects that, people have seen the film, people have heard stories, but there are certain things that are very rare and unknown things. And which is one thing that the movie didn't capture. But because I remember that incident of the film where they're seeing it for the first time and feeling really surprised, and me mentioning that earlier tour, there was a win that they got in that earlier tour in a one-off ODI. It was again a tour to forget for India, as are most West Indian tours. But there's a win that they got in a one-off ODI. I think it was the second ODI of the series. In those days, I think they played test matches and ODIs. It was mixed. So I think 2 test matches had already been done. And then they played an ODI in the middle, and then the second ODI. Again, you go back to test. That's how the tours used to be played in those days. They played this one-off one-day match in Berbice in Guyana.
Yeah.
By the way, the other factoid about that, very interesting bit about that is, I don't think Berbice held another ODI match. That was the last match that Berbice ever hosted. Again, I'd like to be corrected on that if I'm mistaken. But again, top of my head, right, I don't have the benefit of checking Wikipedia or Google right now, but top of my head, things that I can remember. That match, India, so Guyana in those days didn't have even a good enough hotel for the team to stay. So if I'm not mistaken, they took a helicopter ride to Guyana. They actually landed on the ground where they were supposed to play that ODI game. So 2 helicopters, which had whatever 15 odd members of the Indian team, flew in, landed at the ground, at the venue where the match was going to be played, and then flew away. The crowd's there. So can you imagine like the crowds lining up or filling the stadium 2-3 hours before the game is to start? Just try and imagine an helicopter comes, land, players come out, go to their dressing room, helicopters go away. Then they play. Once the game is done, the helicopters come again, they sit, off they are, and they're not even spending a night there because they aren't good enough hotels. I mean, but what happens in that ODI is India, for the first time, beats West Indies in a one-day game. In fact, interestingly, again, from the top of my head, I can remember, it is the very first time that West Indies have lost an ODI match. So ODI cricket had been around for a good decade or so, early 70s when ODI cricket started. In that decade-long time, West Indies must have played about, 60, 70, 80, somewhere close to that, ODIs at home. They hadn't lost a single one-day match to any team. Not to the visiting English team, Australian team, any team. They'd not lost a single ODI match in that decade.
No.
That was the first ever ODI loss that West Indies had playing in their own country, and India beat them. So I think that journey of the 83 World Cup actually started from that tour, which was also in 83 earlier in Feb, I think. This is around February when they played this ODI. They beat. Another interesting fact about that ODI is that Ravi Shastri opens for the very first time. Ravi Shastri, if you remember, came into the team as a lower order batsman. He actually came in as a left arm spinner. And but that game they gambled. They sent him higher up the order. He had a good partnership with Sunil Gavaskar. Sunil Gavaskar got 80, 90 odd, something like that. A big individual score. Quick fire. Again, you keep talking about Gavaskar, being the technically correct batsman and not hitting a lot of boundaries. But that was a quick fire 90 odd, I think Gavaskar got. And then Kapil, almost, I think he got 80 something, coming down at number 4, number 5.
Yeah.
Again, at a strike rate above 180 in those days, a strike rate of 180 odd in a one-day match. Kapil Dev gets 80 odd. And from there on, India put up a big enough total, which is about 280 or something like that. They put a total up like that, which then West Indies failed to chase down. So I think the whole journey of that 83 World Cup started from that Berbice ODI, which is not captured in the film. But the film actually shows you that they're seeing. So imagine the same players who's beaten West Indies and gained that confidence that, listen, we can beat them, have gone to England. And the film is actually showing them being scared. Oh, what are these guys? Look how Malcolm Marshall looks. Look how Andy Roberts. It was rather hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think the film takes some, as you said, creative liberties, or let's say will dramatize certain parts. Yeah. But definitely, I think the story was one that needed to be told to a lot of people in that sense. But yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of things which probably you wouldn't know based on the film. Yeah. Because again, there's certain things they would have just had to leave out. And even though I think it was 3 long hours was the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, 3 odd hours. Yeah.
So it would still have left out a certain things, because again, these are things that, truth be told, you wouldn't have been able to research, even if you did, you were able to access everything. There's no way you can tell that story. I'd love a documentary on this, truth be told. If you could ever get one, I doubt you would, but who knows?
Yeah.
No,
Interesting.
you can pick up my book. Let me do a shameless and get the real story. The other bit, again, because you're talking about things that the film showed, and I was really surprised that they showed that. Is that again, it's a age-old. I'm sure you guys must have heard of it. That Kapil Dev 175. You know of the knock.
Yeah.
But everyone knows that there's no footage because BBC was on strike. Right? That's the kind of story that was told to all of us, and the film also shows that. But again, which is not true.
Exactly, it's not true. They just didn't consider the match important enough to be recorded.
Yeah. If you were to read my book, and when I was researching for the book, I did discover that there were two other games.
Two other games, exactly. There
were 4 games being played. So there was a game, Pakistan, West Indies, if I'm not mistaken, and Australia, England, and maybe, I can't remember the fixtures, but they were. So in the 4 games that were being played, in the pecking order, the India match was number 4 in terms of importance because both India and Zimbabwe were the rank outsiders. Teams like England, West Indies, Australia, even Pakistan were rated much higher, and expected to do well. So, and when I was researching for it, I did find that if the BBC was on strike, how is it that 2 matches did get covered?
Exactly.
So 2 matches did get covered on that day. So if the BBC was on strike, there was no way that you would have footage of 2 other matches, right? Then all matches wouldn't have been done. But 2 other matches were covered. That was one other thing. And the other interesting bit that I came across while researching, which actually told me that the BBC was not on strike, and that is more of an urban legend or a fable that was created and handed over from one person to another in different generation, has carried on since, was the fact that there was a match report written in one of the newspapers which I accessed in terms of archives of a gentleman who was covering the game. And in that match report, he has taken quotes of the Zimbabwean manager who was there. And the Zimbabwean manager there says that when India were like 17 for 5 and you expected like 100 odd score maybe for Zimbabwe to chase, he got a call on the landline. Of course, those days there was no mobile phone. Yeah. He got a call on a landline in the Cricket Association office there, the Zimbabwean manager, which actually was from a BBC correspondent who was then at that time given the responsibility of probably doing the post-match. In those days there was no press conference or thing. So because BBC would be the only one, they would actually come and do the post-match interviews and then carry those reactions in their maybe news bulletins, in different formats, whether radio, television, wherever. So that would have had to be carried. So that reporter actually calls the Zimbabwean manager and says, should I come in early? Because he must have been coming from another town or maybe, 2 hours drive or somewhere where the closest BBC office would have been there. So he actually called him and said that maybe should I leave early because the match might get over early. So my post-match reactions, whatever I want to record. Again, if the BBC was on strike, then this gentleman wouldn't have been calling, right? He wouldn't really bother about doing a post-match report. So he actually calls, and then, again, quite a coincidence that the Zimbabwean manager at the time says, no, he uses a very cliche line to say, cricket is a game of glorious uncertainties and anything can happen. Let's not jump, various cliches he used to tell him that, no, let's relax. And as it turned out, prophetic his words.
Yeah.
Well, it did change. The game completely turned on its head from there. In fact, today I read an interview with Mr. Gavaskar, who it's in the Times of India. It's alongside a quote in the today's paper. I don't know if you see, but it's alongside an article which mentions Sports Today that if you guys haven't seen it, then pick up the Times of India today and do see Sports Today's name. It is there in today's newspaper. So alongside that, there's an article where I think Gavaskar has said that that is the greatest one-day knock that he's ever seen.
Yeah.
And this is Sunil Gavaskar, who's seen a lot of, he was playing the game when ODI cricket started, and since then he's been commentating. So he's effectively seen every possible ODI knock. And for him to say the greatest, then and I think it really does make a case for the best ODI knock of all times, even now. And it's not always the number or the highest. You know, you've got 200s, all right, but the context, conditions, all of that put, you know, is the greatest.
I think he said that on a couple of previous occasions as well, which is why Nikhil, in the story that we offered to television, that's exactly what the story said, that arguably the best innings that's perhaps taken place in ODI cricket.
Not even arguably, unarguably.
Well, you got a few armies out there that keep a close eye on what we say and speak. So yeah, maybe, yeah, you know, just to guard ourselves there.
But those armies weren't born, nah. Those armies weren't
Exactly.
Yeah. I dropped it.
But I'm scared of the armies. They come attacking just as all armies do. They come attacking, defend and
Defend their favorites, let's say.
Yeah.
No, but this whole story about the match not being broadcast, I think that's kind of, as you say, urban legend.
Urban legend.
It's kind of, it's similar to like the story of why India never went for the 1950 World Cup.
Yeah.
Because of the whole barefoot thing.
Yeah,
The simple reality was the AIFF at that point didn't think the World Cup was important. They went entirely wrong. You'd had 3 editions of the FIFA World Cup. It wasn't a big tournament back then compared to what it is say now.
The part of the story also is that they didn't want to spend that kind of money on logistics and everything. Forget the boots, they were just part of the whole.
No, but traveling to Brazil,
Exactly.
that time,
they didn't want to bear those costs, and India back then didn't have the kind of money as well.
obviously,
Cricket
just post-independence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah, more than money, I think that also could have been looked at.
Prestige.
The one other thing, you're right, that they didn't think World Cup was important because that tournament had just started. You really didn't know where it's going to go. What they really wanted to focus on was the Olympic Games.
Yes.
And so they wanted to travel to the Olympics and win a medal there, because that would have been far more important. Like winning an Olympic medal in football was regarded much higher than going and playing that World Cup, which again India didn't qualify, were invited for. Okay,
Yeah, because 1950 post-World War, there was a lot of issues. I think a lot of countries were either unwilling to travel
boycotting.
or were just not going because they didn't have the resources. Again, it's post the Second World War. There was a lot of this thing. And that time, as I said, 3 tournaments had been played, out of which one, Uruguay, was mostly a boycotted tournament because a lot of European nations didn't want to travel to South America.
Exactly.
Thereafter, you had the 34 World Cup in Italy, which was played under fascist rule. 38 was probably the only clean World Cup, but even there, the number of tournaments, the number of teams participating wasn't a lot. Truth be told, at that time, Olympics did mean a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was truth in the fact that a lot of Indian players did play bare feet.
Yeah.
But the thing that they didn't, they were not allowed to play. That's a
myth.
You know, that's a mint of someone's imagination. There were Indian players that would, in fact, I've seen visuals for a longest time. They felt comfortable playing bare feet because that's what they did. But there was a mix. So not all Indian players played bare feet. There were players, and I hear that players from Hyderabad in those days, Hyderabad also contributed, you know, who were slightly more professional at that time. Football was pretty big there. So the Hyderabad players, I believe, used to play, I think it was the Bengal players that liked to play bare feet or something like that. You know, there was a certain, but it was a mix. So certain players played with boots on. Some said, no, we don't like the boot and we are better off playing bare feet. But that wasn't the reason. But that could have been the moment that could have changed Indian football because that impetus was needed. But again, that wasn't to happen. It was to happen in the 83 World Cup. I mean, because we're on the subject of, you know, things that 83 World Cup did, and on the, you know, face of it, we know all stories. By the way, you know, I wanted to send some love and good wishes to the only member of that 83 World Cup team who's not around, and I'd known him pretty closely, Yashpal Sharma. So I hope, you know, he's happy where he is. And he was one of those unsung heroes. He got an 80 odd in that first game versus the West Indies in the World Cup, which actually helped India upset West Indies one more time after that Berbice when
89,
they did it at,
I guess.
Yeah, they do it to them at Old Trafford, right? That game was played in Manchester, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a game that went on for 2 days.
Yeah, the reserve day was used. Yeah.
Yeah, the reserve day, but it didn't start off fresh. So it started off from from
Where
where
it
the
left
game
off?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I think India batted first, and India got to bat in sunny conditions. I mean, rubber the green also went India's way. I think the second day, because then it rained out. The second day when West Indies came out to bat, if I'm not mistaken, it was like overcast conditions. And the, again, top of my head, I could be wrong with the details, but I remember that was a very important game. And so, he was an unsung hero. He was. I mean, I read a lot of stories. He was that serious kind of guy, right? And a lot of Indian players would play a lot of pranks with him. So he was one of the strongest guys in the team. He used to have like really strong arms, which is why he could hit those shots. He played a very crucial knock, I think, against England also in the semi-final.
Yes.
He did.
And he hit a six against Bob Willis, which is spoken of. Again, his strong arms. So the Indian team used to call his shots badam shots. That's because he used to, he was a vegetarian.
Yeah.
And he used to eat a lot of almonds because he used to say that, you non-vegetarians get all your protein by eating non-veg stuff. And so for me, I need my protein. So he used to drink a lot of milk and eat a lot of almonds wherever he would get a chance. So when he used to hit, then the teammates used to say, these are badam shots. All the badams that he eats, his arms are so strong.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I played a interesting knock in the semi-final also. One of those unsung heroes. The only member, unfortunately, I know the team is having celebration. The only member who's not going to be around while the team celebrates.
Yeah. In fact, I was just going through Kapil Paji's Instagram handle just yesterday night, and there's another event which had taken place, and just another occasion for the entire team to get together. And just about a couple of months back, Kapil Paji had shared this image. He said, "Miss you, Yash." In the caption, he'd written that because all the other members were there, just that you didn't have the late Yashpal over there. So yeah, of course the team misses him. But Nikhil, a quick question for you. I'm sure you've had the privilege of speaking with most of the legends over there. Who form the core of this 1983 squad. Do you remember who was the first of these fine gentlemen that you interviewed, and when was that?
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. For my book or in general?
In general.
In general, I think the first one I ever spoke to was Madan Lal, and that was must have been around 2002. And if I'm not mistaken, that was also a 83 World Cup event, and I had just gone as a young reporter from AajTak. I used to be working in AajTak in those days, and I was sent to, do TTs, as they call tic-tacs, with so I think Madan Lal was the first, and he's been with AajTak and India Today for so long, but he wasn't contracted at that time. So I remember, I think he was the first one. That event happened, I think it happened outskirts of Gurgaon, that Terry cricket ground, if I'm not, again, I could be wrong, my memory fails me. But I think he was the first one I spoke to. But for my book, then I spoke to about 7-8 of them. Not to all, 7-8, because that was enough for my narrative to piece together the entire story from the start to now. It's an incredible story, and I narrated that. By the way, tonight, I think, let me tell you, tonight there's even though I'm plugging a rival network at 9:30 p.m. today on Star Sports, there's the actual final that's going to be played, the full final. So the footage of the final was going to be played, and what's really interesting is you have the commentary is actually of the players. So you would have a Sandeep Patil, a Chika, a Gavaskar, everyone doing commentary while the match is playing out. And there is also going to be yours truly doing commentary while the match is going to be played out. So it is something that we did a couple of years ago, which is going to be playing out at 9:30 on Star Sports this evening. So that's, again, it's rarity, because what I found fascinating is usually commentary is done by a third person, right? So any match highlights you watch, it's like whoever is doing the commentary, you get to hear him. This was interesting. It's the actual actors of that moment, players who were there, or the protagonists who were there, actually commentating and saying what they were going through and why he played a shot, or that wicket, or how he felt, what was going through his mind. So they're doing it over live visuals as the match is playing out. So that's pretty interesting at 9:30 p.m. this evening. You can check that out. So that's interesting. But before we wind up, and I thought I'll do a longish story on that. Maybe I will as a video, because that's another story. Apart from the fact that 83 World Cup changed Indian cricket in the sense that gave you confidence to do well on the cricketing field, I think 83 what people, again, an unknown bit, is that 83 World Cup win is the reason why Indian cricket is a superpower in international cricket, even financially. So India's financial or India becoming a financial superpower in cricket also started with a very innocuous sort of an incident that happened at the 1983 World Cup, which transformed the economy of cricket, which completely changed the economy of cricket and made India the most powerful country in terms of money power as well in cricket. Cricketing, though, yes, we all know Sachin Tendulkar saw it, so he started playing cricket. Rahul Dravid, Saurav Ganguly, VVS Lakshman, the next generation all got inspired from that 83 win and thought that they can. And so cricketing journey, we all know, right? What these guys did, other generations try to emulate and do. But the financial journey, which is a parallel story, that's got nothing to do with the cricketing journey, also starts from this 1983 World Cup. It was an innocuous sort of an incident that happened where the then BCCI president NKP Salve was denied extra passes for the final. He was only given 2 passes and he wanted more passes because when India qualified for the final, there were lots of VIPs that suddenly traveled, right, to England to watch India play the final. And so as the BCCI president, imagine he's the president, we as journalists struggle because we are asked for tickets whenever there's a match. Imagine he as president, how much pressure he must have from VIPs. It could be politicians, business, tycoons and what have you, big guys who'd be wanting tickets, who all flew in overnight to watch India play the final. He had to arrange for passes. And the MCC at that time, which ran, it was not the ECB, there was another term for it, the TTNB or something, I forget what was the full form of the Cricket Association that managed cricket at that time, but equivalent of ECB, I'm saying, in those days, right? So they had all the passes and they refused to give him any more. He said, no, this is what you have, make do with it. That's what triggered with one was the catalyst that changed the financial landscape of cricket in India. And today India is the richest. Maybe I'll do a detailed story as to what happened, how it happened, all of that put together. Maybe tonight, later tonight, or tomorrow. So 83 World Cup had, impact at various levels, not just cricket, non-cricketing wise also.
Interesting. Wow.
Chalo, on that, maybe let's just quickly have some comments as well. Yeah, let's quickly run through a few comments.
We had a few coming in, I think.
Yeah.
You can answer the comments. I'm gonna scoot because my time's also done on this. Huh?
Just
answer. See you guys.
Bye bye.
All right, Nikhil. Thanks for your time.
In fact, as Sachin Kashyap points out, that Yashpal Sharma is knocking against England in the semis. That's what we were discussing.
Yeah.
Unsung hero.
Unsung hero. And I think it was in that game. No, it was the Australia game. I think where there were 4 wickets being taken by Madan Paji and then 4 apiece. I think 4 apiece for Madan Paji and Roger Binney. So again, one of the other things, which is, and that's what I like to draw parallels, let's say, between the 83 and the 2011 World Cup winning journeys, let's say, or the squads, is that, it wasn't centered around a couple of protagonists, let's say, as has lately been pointed out by Gautam Gambhir as well in an interview which has been doing the rounds. But when you look at pure numbers, let's say, you see complete team effort over there from both the squads. So you had somebody like a Roger Binney, Madan Lal, and Mohinder Amarnath, who was constantly picking up wickets. So, it was a team effort. Then you had, Ravi Shastri giving you knocks. You had
Kapil Dev was constantly contributing.
Yashpal Sharma. So, all in all, it wasn't, as we've been told all along that, it was this moment, that moment. When you look at the entire journey, you don't just get to the final, or it's not just that one moment that wins you the World Cup. It is the entire journey, the entire gamut of it that you've got to look at. And that's the beautiful part about both 83 and 2011, let's say. The fact that you had people take responsibility. That's something, in fact, that Yashpal Sharma, I think, has spoken in a chat that he had with us. We've got that interview up as well, wherein we were lucky enough to have all of them present. So check out that interview, and that's where, while they were regaling about that whole journey, they talk about how, I think it was, can't recall who it was, but again, one of the players there mentioned about how everyone had taken things into their own hands after that first win that they registered against the West Indies. That, listen, this can be done. It's something which is achievable, and let's just in personal capacity take responsibility for whatever roles that have been set for us. So that's the beautiful part of it, and that's exactly what you saw in 2011 as well. You knew the kind of starts that the openers were expected. You knew who were going to be finishing things off. You knew that Zahi is going to be bowling in the power play. Then he's going to be doing tricks with the old ball as well. So, and that's the formula, let's say, that's how winning teams are made. You have these roles defined, you have people chip in, and it's the team effort at the end of the day which brings the country such laurels.
Absolutely. And as Cricketers Fun is pointing out, it was the TCCB, which is the Test and County Cricket Board. Yes. That was the body which used to be the equivalent of what the ECB or the England and Wales Cricket Board is right now. Here we go up, thoda, a lot of, no, up. Let's see.
Or some underrated factors I think Mayank was talking about. What's that? Or I will give that a miss.
Yeah. That's really it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyhow, guys, thank you so much. We did just skim through some of the comments over there, and there was Shane and Nikhil. And
I like SP Roy's one. We have to take that. I just scroll up slightly, very slightly. There is hopefully when you guys reach 40-50 plus euros, you're telling people about a hopeful 2023 World Cup win. The way that Nikhil was just telling us about 83.
Well, you never know. Fingers
You never
crossed.
know. Funnier things have happened.
Yeah,
Things have happened. But anyway, we'll take your leave for now.
We will.
Yes, thank you guys so much for joining us. Don't forget, if you enjoy our work, like, share, subscribe, tap that bell, leave us more comments. We love hearing from you guys. Follow us on socials and stay tuned. Plenty more coming your way. But for now, from Harshit, me and Nikhil who's left us, goodbye.